I just had this conversation with a neighbor at work who was repainting their space, and they had chosen Bear's Simply White, I think, which was, according to the TikToks, she said, one of the most favorite colors of white. But if you look through whites on any paint color deck, then you will see that there's hundreds of whites out there. And they all differ from each other because of their undertones. So understanding an undertone is extremely important. You're only going to get to know this by training your eye to look and comparing one to the other. So that's why I love having the paint deck with me when I'm selecting colors. You're now listening to Design Curious, a place where you, creative one, are here to learn about what it really is like to be an interior designer. And I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. If you're worried about how to succeed in a creative career, if you're ready to learn your next steps to become an interior designer, and if you want the satisfaction of doing something you love every day, you are in the right place. Grab a coffee, a notebook, and let's dig into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to episode 177 of Design Curious Podcast. Today on the podcast, we're continuing in our design skills series. Today, we are talking about mastering practical skills, the ones that you should be focusing on and how to practice them and get those practical skills honed so that you can, on the spot, be able to answer your clients' questions and come up with great designs whenever you need them. Before we get into that, don't forget that we have my design mentor, where we can work on these practical skills. You can meet with me one-on-one and I can help you, give you exercises or help you explore where you might be weak in different practical skills, and we can work on that. So now let's get into the topic of practical skills. So if you've gone to design school, gotten a degree in design or a certificate, then you will have a handle on some of these practical skills. You might be lacking in a little bit of applied experience of the skills, though, so it's definitely good to work on these. So let's go through the ones that I'm going to highlight as being necessary for having successful projects as a residential interior designer. So we're going to first focus on color theory as a core skill, and we have an episode coming up with Maria Killam, who I consider the color expert. I really enjoyed talking with her, and I think you'll enjoy that conversation when it comes out in April. Color is such an important topic. It is emotional. It's part of the neuroaesthetics conversation where people can have a memory or emotional reaction tied to color, and it can really change the whole feel of a space. So you're going to need to work on your personal approach to color. Are you very experienced with selecting colors? And can you see the undertones of each color, especially when it comes to the neutrals? Whites, there's 100 shades of whites. I just had this conversation with a neighbor at work who was repainting their space, and they had chosen Bear's Simply White, I think, which was, according to the TikToks, she said, one of the most favorite colors of white. But if you look through whites on any paint color deck, then you will see that there's hundreds of whites out there. And they all differ from each other because of their undertones. So understanding an undertone is extremely important. You're only going to get to know this by training your eye to look and comparing one to the other. So that's why I love having the paint deck with me when I'm selecting colors, because I can see, okay, I'm looking for one that's more of a pink undertone, and I can see on my fan deck that this one looks more pink than the one next to it, so I'm going to gravitate towards that, things like that. So it's important to know the color undertone. It's important to know the color temperature, saturation, and value, the hue, all of these things that go into making color different from each other and livable. So I will tend to select colors for my clients that are less saturated than they might initially gravitate to. If they were in a paint store, they might pick a color that's very saturated. But I have found from my experience over the years that the more saturated a color is, the earlier you get tired with it. So it's less lasting, less timeless. And if it's a muted version of that color, then it remains a little more timeless and something that you're not going to want to change out in a year. But you want to select colors also that are harmonious with each other. So learning color theory can be really helpful with that. It can impact your mood, can impact your perception of a space. So many people ask if they shouldn't paint a small space dark color because it'll make it feel smaller. Well, probably it will. Although when you have like black on the walls, it's hard to define the corners. And so it just feels like an all-encompassing space. But that might be the mood you're going for. So it really depends. It's not like I would say never paint a small space black. I love painting powder rooms, dark, dramatic colors because it's fun and it's in a small space. You're going to develop your own opinions, your own go-to colors for your clients that are tried and true, and they will put a lot of trust in that. When you say that I've used this color in my own home, I've used this color in 5 other houses, this is the white that always looks great no matter where you go, no matter what light source you have, then they're going to trust you a little bit more. Okay, the next skill I want you to work on is building your confident designer eye. So you're going to train yourself to see proportion and balance and observe things when you're in a space. Just always be observing, I guess I should say. And you probably are. If you are a designer or if you've always loved design or you're a creative individual, then you're going to be noticing your surroundings. And so be more cognizant of those reflections on the space and understanding proportion and scale and balance, because it's going to come into play so often when you're selecting furniture, especially for a client. You want the size of the furniture to be proportional. I said before when I was first starting out in selecting furniture, I didn't learn how to select furniture in design school. I learned that afterwards when I was doing model homes. But I kind of always assumed that every sofa would fit in every space. I just thought there was a standard size sofa, and I didn't even think about the fact that you can make them extra deep or extra long, or that manufacturers will create them in a certain depth and style and height and all of that. I was pretty ignorant of that, but I just assumed that every sofa would fit. And of course, that's where you double check everything, is when you scale it into your drawings and you see, oh, well, a 44-inch deep sofa here is not going to work. I need something that's more apartment size, something that's 36 inches deep. And so that's something that you can sharpen and learn over time. Always maybe carry a little tape measure with you as you go about and you are sitting in a sofa that really works for you. You can know how tall you are and how deep that seat is. And, note that down, because you can always customize a sofa from your vendor, almost always, as long as they allow customization, to fit a certain individual. So maybe your partner is 6'5" and they're having trouble finding chairs that they love to sit in. And so when he or she finds one that fits them well, then you can take down those notes. So these are observations in real life you might not learn in design school, but you're going to want to sharpen them so that you can apply them to your projects. Start visiting furniture showrooms and go to a lot of hotels if you can travel, get inspired that way. Restaurants, all of these places are education. I love it when I go to Las Vegas Market, stay in those fancy hotels, go to all the fancy restaurants, because the design is always really inspiring. The scale that they had to do it to is just amazing. And so I always have fun and get inspired and take notes when I'm visiting those places. The next thing you're going to want to work on is your space planning skills. So really understanding traffic flow through a space in a home is very important. There's a lot of open floor plans, especially here in California. I think there's a trend going towards less open floor plans, but I don't know if we'll ever be as closed off as we were, a couple hundred years ago, where they were more concerned about heating all of those rooms, and so they could close off the ones they weren't using. But traffic flow through a house is really critical. It depends on how many people are living in that home, day to day, or if they entertain a lot, if you want your entertainment spaces to have a good traffic flow, if you want people to be directed towards the backyard or towards the kitchen or stay in the living room space, traffic flow is going to make a big difference on that. And the function of the space. You want to be thinking as you're using your own kitchen, how do I like having these drawers here? Is it having the silverware or the flatware drawer over here, or do I need to have my cups and plates above the dishwasher? How you store things, the function of how much counter space you have on either side of the cooktop, things like that. So you can hone your space planning skills by your observation of these things. Common mistake is that there's too much empty space. So there could be awkward layouts. Now, sometimes you can't help it. Like the architect may not really have been thinking about the furniture layout in a space. And sometimes there's going to be a big open space you don't know what to do with. So it could be back-to-back sitting spaces or creating a little game table area or conversation spot. Trying to creatively think how to work out awkward layouts. So you could probably even Google floor plans with awkward spaces and then just quiz yourself and test yourself on coming up with some solutions for that, because you're going to have clients that come to you and say, I have this extra large landing at the top of the stairs, but it's too small to fit a sofa. What do I do with this space? And so you need to start creatively thinking ahead about how to use up that space. You don't want it to go to waste, and you want it to be beautiful and intentional and a part of the home. So I would recommend testing yourself and quizzing yourself with space planning problems in order to fine-tune those skills. Then you're going to work on your composition with focal points. One of the really common problems you'll run into if you're going into a remodel or just advising someone on the layout of their family room is when there's a split focal point in that room of the fireplace and the TV. Sometimes you can't align them. As much as people don't like TVs over the fireplace, sometimes that's the only solution. But it's a good thing to think about to see if there's any alternates. It might be asymmetrical solutions on a wall for having the fireplace and the TV staggered, but then using cabinetry and other features to help it remain a beautiful focal point in the room. And then learning how to layer textures and lighting and accessories, art, greenery into the space to help the composition come together. Sometimes the space doesn't feel alive or welcoming until you have all those finishing touches in there. Even if it's been designed beautifully with furnishings and the architecture and the space plan looks good, it doesn't feel quite welcoming until you get those softer touches in or that focal artwork on the wall. I love to use larger artwork, larger than most people usually buy, which, as a designer, you can have a lot of good resources for large artwork. And it helps to fill up a space. You don't necessarily need a piece of furniture on that wall. You might just need a really big piece of art. So things to think about there. And you're going to develop your taste over time. So that's another area, is that your taste will evolve with experience. You'll be curating how you choose what stays and what goes. You kind of develop your own principles and rules as a designer when you walk into the space and say, like, I always do this or I never do that, most of the time. And then you can know when to break your own rules too. A lot of the times I will encourage clients not to put TVs in their bedrooms, mainly for the health purposes of it. It's not great for your sleep. It's not great for your relationship. And it doesn't look great either. So I will encourage them not to have TVs in the bedroom. But if they're really insistent on it, then we'll work around it, of course. You'll develop kind of your tried and true and then your go-tos. Like I always put can lights in the ceiling in the bedrooms as well as in the laundry room. I have multiple, or the closet, or things like that, where previously the builder might just do a monopoint. You have go-to ways for improving the lighting in a house. And that can honestly, like just going through and doing a lighting plan that updates the house so much, and it can really help the appreciation of a home. clients might not realize that until they have a designer on hand. And the last piece of advice for pulling all of these practical skills together would just be to practice. Like create some daily exercises for yourself, redesigning existing rooms. I've said before how hard it is to redesign your own space that you live in, but challenge yourself and see like, okay, if I wasn't living here, what would I recommend to a client who has minimalism taste or who has maximalism taste? Try to push yourself to be creative in the details that you're putting in there. And then create quick concept boards for practice. Put together mood boards on Pinterest and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of ways to push yourself to practice, but it's not going to get better by default. You really have to develop it. And especially with working with color, I would think above all, like practice with color. And if you're painting out your own rooms a couple of times with your own sweat equity, then you're going to learn a lot through that trial and error and understanding how light can change color and how colors that might be reflected from the outside, there's a lot of green coming in or it's reflecting off the neighbor's house and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to practice these skills and a lot of practical skills you need to know. Of course, the practical skills of every designer like CAD drafting and things like that, it's always very useful. So always looking to grow and improve these types of skills. I feel with practical skills, most people think about these type of things when they think about what an interior designer does and the type of skills that they need. That's probably why I spent a little bit less time on this topic today, because everyone kind of knows what the practical skills are, but I hope you got a few ideas on how you should probably be trying to practice them more every day, be more observant, and then incorporate that into your schedule and your goals for growth. All right, we have one more episode on the design skills series, and then I'm going to tie it all together after that on how to be the best designer using all of these skills pulled together. So stay tuned for that on the solo episode. Next week, I'm going to have another great interview for you you're going to love. So stay tuned for that. And until then, stay creative. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode, please leave a rating and a review. This helps me reach other curious creatives like you. If you have a topic request or would like to contact me, simply head over to my website, rwarddesign.com, or email me at podcast@rwarddesign.com.